This Voice of San Diego podcast is sponsored in part by the Downtown San Diego Partnership. As a nonprofit news organization, Voice of San Diego depends on our members, foundations, and sponsors like the Downtown San Diego Partnership. We are very grateful for all of our supporters and will recognize their support during the show. In San Diego's urban core, you can feel a downtown that is changing, innovating, finding itself. A downtown that is growing upward and into the future. To become part of Downtown's story, visit createthefuturesd.com. And if you like Voice of San Diego's work and want to become a sponsor, contact us at development@voiceofsandiego.org.
Welcome to the Voice of San Diego podcast, where we make sense of local politics, schools, housing, public safety, the civic issues that impact the life of a San Diego resident. We break it down so you can understand it and make educated decisions.
Everything that goes into our investigative reporting, the journalists, public records requests, the data crunching, and this very show depends on the support of people like you because we're a nonprofit news organization. Enjoy the show.
Okay, welcome to those of you listening on News Radio 600 Kogo. My name is Scott Lewis, here with my friend Andrew Keatts.
Hey man, let's start the show.
You're still stinging.
The mayor got us good.
Mayor of San Diego, Kevin Faulkner, we offered him a chance to sort of hit us back. We've given him the goat a few times. I've covered him for 12 years and written exactly 12,000 things about how wrong he is. But he took us up on the chance to come roast us in front of our biggest donors at an event, and he roasted the podcast.
But guys, the last podcast was an hour and 21 minutes. An hour and 21 minutes. If I can barely sit through a Sandag meeting that long, how the hell am I going to listen to that?
Afterward, Andy's like, should we just cancel the podcast? As I tried to explain, shows how important the podcast is, that it's occupied so much of the mind space of our 5 listeners.
That's right.
We got a great show. We've got Ken Malbrough coming on. He is running for county supervisor. That would make us, that's the 4th the county supervisors we've brought in, or supervisor candidates we've brought in so far.
Right. Still missing Bonnie DeMonis.
Yeah. See how that goes. Looking forward to
Invitation stands.
We won't start worrying that she's not coming until March. Oh no.
Yeah.
It's March.
Well, March 7th, right? Is the filing deadline?
Right. Yeah, that's when it gets real.
That's when the campaign begins.
We also we're going to talk about a few other things, but first I want to talk about owning the libs.
Okay. Yeah, right.
It's a particular political perspective that is about owning the libs.
Yeah, it isn't necessarily in support of conservative ideology so much as it is an idea space around hating liberals and wanting to own them, and then working backwards from there and supporting anything that achieves that goal.
Right. So Donald J. Trump, president, did a tweet this week that was really trying to figure this one out. So he says, so this is in the context that Judge Curiel, federal judge, ruled for the Trump administration that a new border barrier, a.k.a. a wall, could be built without worrying about environmental laws and environmental protections.
Yeah, what the federal government did to waive certain environmental protections was on the up and up because of the federal government.
Now, Voice of San Diego has been on this story for a decade because previous barriers had the same sort of issue, right? There was that is one of the more under-discussed parts of this, is that wildlife does go back and forth, water goes back and forth, air goes back and forth. There's a lot of environmental connections between us and Mexico that don't really care about this.
Well, because a border's a political line, and the world at large doesn't respect political lines.
So the California Environmental Quality Act and other laws like that don't apply to the border wall, as was decided about a decade ago, and this sort of reaffirmed that. Now, on the one side were environmental groups and the state of California. They said, we don't want this wall. It should conform to our environmental protections, all that stuff. Right?
Yeah, and this was purely and entirely based on their opposition to waiving environmental laws. It had nothing to do with the politics of the wall itself.
Sure.
It's purely the defending CEQA.
There was no signaling involved.
No,
this was all about...
This was about the sanctity of the California Environmental Quality Act, landmark legislation.
So Trump gets a favorable ruling from a judge he had previously dismissed as not American.
Yeah.
And he gets this favorable...
Interestingly, on a case that had nothing to do with Mexico or the border,
right.
Like this. But anyway, sorry.
It was about his own university.
Right.
So Trump tweets. Now, again, remember, California is doing everything it can to stop this wall. The state of California officially is doing that.
Yeah.
And he tweets, as a sort of victory lap to own the libs, I have decided that sections of the wall that California once built now will not be built until the whole wall is approved. Big victory yesterday. But what is happening there?
Yeah.
To show you, after I win the right to build a wall in your state, I am not going to build the wall.
I have defeated your challenge trying to stop me from building the wall. And with that challenge, I will refuse to build the wall until I can build more of the wall.
It's fantastic. You could just see Javier Becerra in his office like, I guess we didn't need to sue.
Yeah.
Or maybe it was just a big like chess move, right? Like 3 steps, get him to win this and then punish us.
I guess. I don't know. Can't wrap my head around it.
One of the things we've been thinking about is, so Trump's on his way to San Diego to visit the border wall prototypes, which are in the city of San Diego.
Yes.
And
land that is in the jurisdiction that we call the city of San Diego.
And he's visiting these wall prototypes to see which one he likes.
He's going to go stand in front of these 30 feet pieces of concrete and go, oh, yeah.
That's
30,
the one.
30 feet of concrete.
So we've been wondering who's going to be the local politician that goes with him, right? So the obvious choice is one of the first congressmen who endorsed him. That was Duncan Hunter Jr.
Yeah.
But he's a little beleaguered.
He's tied up. He's more beleaguered than the AG even.
So does he give Duncan Hunter a boost or does he ignore him?
Right.
I don't know. Famously, considering how many things and drama surround the president, he doesn't like other people's drama. Very little tolerance for other people's drama.
Yeah, that's true.
So there's that. That's an interesting.
Under normal circumstances, we might presume that the Republican mayor of the city he's going to would like to appear alongside the Republican president of the United States when he comes to town.
We haven't heard yet.
We have no idea. But that would be, a typical situation. You might imagine that
it's literally in the city,
right?
And then there's somebody like Bill Wells, who's running for Duncan Hunter. Look, there's a big concentration out there in the East County, big Trump group. So
Joel Anderson
seems like a likely candidate. Bill Wells just told us last week that he's a fan of the president. Yeah. He just doesn't, pay attention to all these weird tweets.
Maybe more far-flung from the border, someone like Sam Abed, the mayor of Escondido.
Yeah.
Or if Darrell Issa were still running, perhaps Darrell Issa would be interested.
So get on the Voice of San Diego podcast page, Facebook page.
The Facebook group.
And Facebook group, Voice of San Diego podcast, and submit your guess of who's going to be the person that goes along with this.
Yeah.
Is it Councilman Scott Sherman, Lori Zaff, who's, probably not Todd Gloria.
Dig deep. Maybe some Imperial Beach council members.
Yeah.
Ron Morrison from National City.
Yeah,
who knows? There's some Republican officials who would presumably like some FaceTime with the Republican president of the United States when they visit this county and city.
Wouldn't mind going to the border wall prototypes and doing some staged, pointing at them, that kind of thing.
Yeah, exactly.
Stand behind him at the press conference there, that sort of stuff.
When President Obama was here, if he had come here for if
It'd be like a raffle.
Yeah,
the Democrats would line up and
I think they would have wanted to be there.
Now, one of the I had a consultant explain to me that he thinks this is actually part of the organics of the different parties, that the local, Ryan Klumpner, he was saying that the local Democrats are always doing something to signal broader social change and movement and their connections with broader national movements, whereas local Republicans are mostly focused on just getting the job done here and not necessarily associating themselves with national politicians.
Federalism.
Sure. So maybe that's it. So we'll see. But put your guesses in at Voice of San Diego Podcast, the group, and let us know what you think. We had some breaking news, great scoop, that followed an investigative work. It's always funny how you do some of these investigative things, and then your story sort of climaxes right as you're not done with it.
Well, it's kind of like being it's like the act of observing someone changes their behavior, and you need to account for that in your experiments.
Yeah.
The act of investigating things often will change the behavior of that which you are investigating.
So let's lay some groundwork here, and then talk about the news. The groundwork is that there's an agency in San Diego called Civic San Diego. It is a nonprofit that is actually run by the city of San Diego and by the mayor's office, basically, right? So it has its own board, but the board doesn't even get to decide who's in charge of the agency. The mayor does, right?
Right. And the board is appointed by a combination of the mayor and the city council.
You can't understand what Civic San Diego is until you understand what it was. And what it was two different agencies that did the same sort of work. So one of them was called the Southeastern Economic Development Corporation, and the other was called the Center City Development Corporation.
SEDC and CCDC.
Basically, their jobs were to act as the sort of implementer of the redevelopment agency, which was the city of San Diego. So they took redevelopment money, which was money freed up. We're not going to get into how.
Property taxes. Yeah,
freed up to invest in development of these areas that were so-called blighted, right? Yeah. And so these agencies helped those deals get through. So, hey, here's a developer who would build a shopping mall and some housing here if only they had, an easy permitting process and maybe $10,000.
Right.
And so we'll make that happen.
Yeah.
And stuff like that. So these two agencies did that, and to varying degrees of success. Downtown San Diego is often hailed as a success as far as redevelopment. Southeastern San Diego, not so much sometimes. And the two agencies managed that process.
Yeah, they also have their own relatively toward history of scandal.
Right. So we uncovered embezzlement. That was our first big, huge win as Voice of San Diego investigative outlet. We uncovered some embezzlement that was occurring at the Southeastern Economic Development Corporation. And then we uncovered a conflict of interest at the Center City Development Corporation. And following all that scandal and the end of redevelopment, that was
both of those things resulted in criminal charges against the people involved.
And both contributed to a discussion about maybe we should just end the practice of redevelopment, this sort of subsidizing that was occurring.
Which is a statewide program that eventually was ended. And when it was ended, the issues that had plagued San Diego were often cited as issues about why this program had run afoul and needed to be reined in.
Exactly. And so out of that, redevelopment ends. Now, there's still some projects left over.
There was also budget pressures, we should say. It was not clearly like, oh, this is a scandal-plagued mess. We should kill it. They were looking for money.
Well, and also, like, redevelopment was supposed to end at some point.
Yes,
like, you can't. It was basically taking money that could have gone to schools and county services and using it for this investment in development. And at some point that's supposed to end and that money is supposed to go to where it's supposed to.
Right.
So all of that happens and there's still projects though, and there's still money left over from this whole thing. And so the city says, let's just dissolve Center City Development Corporation and Southeastern Economic Development Corporation, and we will merge them into one entity called Civic San Diego. And Civic San Diego will manage the sort of rundown of all of these things. And then for a while, it actually had this mandate to kind of figure out how to survive.
Yeah.
Right.
Find new ways to get money to do kind of sort of the stuff you already do.
And the second job it had is to continue to process the permits for downtown. Basically, we've said to downtown what you can build where. So deciding whether a permit actually conforms to those rules shouldn't be a very hard process. So this agency was charged with doing that as fast as it could.
Yeah, do that, and that is a crucial element of this. Be fast.
Mm-hmm.
Be fast. Be faster and better than the city development staff at that same job. This is the value add that civic leaders see in Civic San Diego is that you can have some certainty of development of your economic situation with a new development that you want to build in downtown San Diego because Civic San Diego is developer friendly.
Right. Now there's a couple groups that don't like this.
Yeah.
One would be considered those who think that any project should get more scrutiny. That we shouldn't, no matter how many rules are in place that they conform to, we should put more scrutiny on every development project.
Yeah.
The other group are labor unions that would like to see those projects.
I would add a third group too.
Okay.
Like good government types.
Sure.
Why
do we have this nonprofit entity? This should be a government. Nobody else does this around the state. It should be a government
transparent
process.
accountability. Yes.
Right. And so the other group, labor unions, and they say, I think the most cynical version is they want to have a say in these projects and have them go through the political process that they have more influence on right now.
Yeah, if some of these large projects had to eventually get a vote of the city council to go forward, then that more political process where they have more say, they might be able to extract more significant concessions for their own interests, like union-friendly construction contracts, union-friendly concessions for hotel workers or grocery store workers, something along these lines. Not a guarantee, not a certainty, but just by virtue of bringing it to the city council, you'd have one more way to exact leverage on these sorts of decisions.
And also, what they would argue is that we should not create poverty jobs out of these projects.
Not just what they would argue. That is very much what they argue.
We should care about the quality of jobs that are created out of these projects, and that means that it should go through our real public political process that is established.
Yeah, and the people who make these decisions should be held accountable to voters, as opposed to the appointed board who has a squishy sense of accountability from anyone.
One of the people that made this case was Murtaza Baksamusa, who is affiliated with the Building Trades Council.
Yes.
And runs an affordable housing effort out of that group or affiliated with it. And he was appointed to the civic board by Bob Filner.
Yes.
And, that brief encounter with a Democratic mayor that we had that was a crucial moment.
Was a moment where it was clear that something was going to change at Civic, that a guy like Murtaza was on the board at all.
Right.
And pretty clearly he was adversarial to the mission from the moment he was there. Or didn't think that the way the organization had been going and the way other leaders in the organization conceived it was the right one.
So he files a lawsuit.
Yeah.
And his lawsuit alleges what?
His lawsuit essentially alleges that the city had failed to provide proper oversight as it's required to over this authority that it had delegated to the agency. So it sort of that lawsuit to some extent concedes that you can delegate this type of authority to an agency like this. But if you do, you must be held accountable to holding it accountable. Right. You must demonstrate that you are in a position of oversight and management.
Now, this is a couple years ago, and I remember feeling like this was just getting kind of brushed aside. No big deal.
Yeah.
Just a guy.
Because he had been a naysayer to the agency for a while. So it was like, well, okay, so now he has a lawsuit.
So it just kind of goes on and on. Meanwhile, again, Civic San Diego is looking for its business model, what it's going to do to survive and keep doing this. Meanwhile, it weathers legislation attempt to dissolve it, basically. Mm-hmm. And the Jerry Brown saves it. The governor saves it, says, you don't worry about this legislation, vetoes the legislation. Mm-hmm. And so it's faced all these challenges. But all of a sudden, this lawsuit kind of gathers momentum, and it discovers employees through the discovery process that there's a lot of employees who don't apparently like what's going on there. not nearly the scandals that we uncovered a decade ago.
Yeah, I mean, embezzlement and the criminal charges against Nancy were criminal charges.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, the SEDC was charged with felonies.
Yeah.
Right? This is not that. These are considerably smaller than that. They're issues with contracting process, that there was some essentially allegations that they were playing fast and loose to give the projects to a select group of developers that they wanted to work with or they thought would be able to work fast because they had this urgency to get things done.
Yeah, so like one of the contractors is alleged to have helped maybe influence the contract setting up of the contract that he eventually got for a park in East Village, right? Like it's very removed.
And these are complicated allegations that deal with pretty specific statutes of state law around conflicts of interest and sole source contracting. We talked to a few experts, and I don't want to get into the details on which those decisions hinge, because ultimately a judge would have to decide that in the first place. But the experts we talked to said, at the very least, it is not clear that this is a violation. From what you're describing, it doesn't seem like it. Maybe if this and maybe if that. But there was nothing in it that we could talk to somebody about that was a slam dunk clear violation.
So
but it is nonetheless, there's a lot of things.
And especially when you have 3 or 4 employees sort of.
One was the former CFO.
Right.
One was the guy in charge of contracts.
So just them flipping over to, call foul on this organization, I think that itself, no matter what they say, causes enough drama and enough stress that we learned Wednesday that the president of Civic San Diego, Reese Jarrett, is retiring. And there are settlement negotiations ongoing right now that may end up with Murtaza Baksamusa that would end up in perhaps a vast overhaul of the agency entirely.
Yeah, because his lawsuit does not request money. It requests changes to the agency.
Right. And so huge news for anybody who cares about development and civic government in San Diego. Broke that Wednesday night. Good job to you and Lisa getting that story. And then, again, it came to a climax with this announcement about the retirement right on Wednesday night. We got that story out. Check it out at voiceofsandiego.org. We'll get more on the updates as this goes forward. The settlement, well, obviously, David Alvarez, city councilman, tweeted that.
He said, "What is going on?
What is going on? I had no idea that any of this was going on." That's Voice of San Diego. The newsmakers have to read it to get the news, right?
That's what they say.
All right. This is, so stay tuned. We got Ken Malbrough coming. We also have our hero and goat. And again, go to Voice of San Diego's podcast, Voice of San Diego podcast Facebook group, and let us know who you think is going to go with Donald Trump to check out the wall prototypes, those 30-foot concrete barriers. We produced the first half of this wonderful podcast with our friends and colleagues at News Radio 600 Cobra.
The following is a sponsored segment from the Prevent Drowning Foundation of San Diego. Voices San Diego is a nonprofit. The majority of our budget comes from grants and donations from readers and listeners like you. But we also rely on corporate and nonprofit sponsors that help us continue to produce more of the quality local journalism you expect from us. We're grateful for all those who invest in news. If you'd like to join them, contact development@vosd.org. I'm Kinsey Moreland, and I am in the beautiful Voice of San Diego podcast studio with Buck Buchanan. He's the president of Prevent Drowning Foundation of San Diego. Thanks for being here.
Yeah, Kinsey, hi.
And George Garcia. He's the pool manager in City Heights.
Hey, how you doing?
What's the name of the pool there?
City Heights Swim Center.
City Heights Swim Center. All right. And also Nicole Shaw. She's a pool manager at Memorial Pool.
Hi.
Where's Memorial Pool?
It's in Barrio Logan.
So, Buck, you're here today to tell us a little bit about waterproofing San Diego. What exactly is that?
Okay, great question, by the way. So the nonprofit foundation that we have, the Prevent Drowning Foundation of San Diego, has a major vision, and the vision is to teach every kid in San Diego how to swim. So it's a bit lofty. We know that. And so the mechanism by which we're trying to get that accomplished is a program called Waterproofing San Diego. And the idea is that every 3rd through 5th grader in San Diego receives a lecture that kind of motivates them to want to get in the water and be safe. And then we follow that up with learn to swim lessons. And so that's a series of 10 different lessons, and it gets them comfortable in the water. And then after they complete that, they go to the beach, one of the city beaches for the very first time. So that 3-pronged approach we call Waterproofing San Diego. And the whole goal behind it is that in order to teach people to swim, you just can't touch the water once and all of a sudden be really good at it. You literally got to get in it more and more and more, which we know is a challenge. But a lot of people, and particularly these two here, they gravitate to it and they're good at it. And so it gives them a chance from when they're a young kid, when they're maybe tots or even younger, all the way up to the teenage years. They're getting experience in the water, and then they see a little bit of opportunity and some fun. And then these two in particular are able to turn that into vocations and get paid. So that's a home run right there.
The rest of the sponsored interview with the Prevent Drowning Foundation of San Diego will air at the end of this week's episode.
We're back. I'm kind of a podcast celebrity now. I don't know if you heard.
You. Unbelievable.
Well, I was, I don't know if you heard, I was invited on this show, Love It or Leave It.
I did hear
live show.
Only because it upset so many Democrats in town.
So
virtually every connected Democrat has complained to me in one way or another that you, so clearly not a member of the tribe, was invited.
So the Love It or Leave It is a spinoff of the Pod Save America group. John Lovett is a fantastic performer, very impressive. And they filled the Balboa Theater with 1,300 or so just screaming fans. These people love that show and that guy. It was really impressive. And it was a great show. I had the time of my life. It was so much fun. And, you know, I ended up bantering a lot with John. I was, you know, I guess he called me, he told me to stop my contrarian bull. Which I'm not the contrarian. You're the contrarian. I'm very much in line with most thought.
I wouldn't describe myself that way.
Really?
No.
Anyway, it was truly a joy. I'm, you know, again, I don't think I was that much of a contrarian. I was just trying to point out interesting things.
Well, he is a liberal.
Yeah.
Talking to a room full of liberals, that with no real attempt to like give an audience to dissenting views.
You know,
so in that respect, you very much were contrarian. You were offering perspective contrary to what he and everyone else in that room wanted to hear.
Well, but for instance, one of the points, I think I actually was pointing out a little bit of more liberal things, like the thing about the gun.
This is exactly what a contrarian would say.
One of the
my dissents were because I was to his left.
Well, one of the points, for example, he was making fun of Marco Rubio, something he apparently likes to do.
Yes,
and
big part of his portfolio.
And I pointed out, I said, Marco Rubio made a good point about the gun thing. He's like, you know, are you willing as Democrats to say you're going to ban all semi-automatic rifles and such? And everybody in the crowd that he was at that town hall cheered.
Yeah.
And the senator that was there with him, Nelson, wasn't willing to say that. And I think like that's, I was pointing out, like, look, what do they want? I don't know what they want. I don't know what he wants as far as gun control and such. And I think it's worth pointing out. So stuff like that I was doing, I guess.
Okay. I've had a conversation with you before. I know exactly what you were doing. I wasn't there, but I can imagine.
I had a lot of fun, and it really showed me how good podcasts can be. And so we're going to work on that.
Next stop, 1,300 screaming fans paying $100 a head to listen to a professional comedian.
So our hero of the week.
So artist Michael Rosenblatt is trying to fill Lincoln Park with art. Mile of Art is his attempt to fill the neighborhood with what he calls mini murals, paintings on wood panels that are treated to last outside and installed on local businesses with the help of a volunteer from the local Home Depot. There are already 4 murals at the intersection of 50th Street and Imperial Avenue. They're on the outside of an auto retail shop, a car wash, the fence around a women's recovery area, and an outdoor community gathering and event space. He said, "This could be a big part of the neighborhood's renaissance. My dream and passion is to create art where art is needed rather than just putting it in fancy galleries." Great.
Good stuff.
Great project.
Our GOAT of the week.
You lose! Good day, sir!
Many years ago, California decided it wanted to replenish the white sea bass population in the ocean. I haven't caught one of those yet. Still working on that. So the state contracted with Hub's SeaWorld, local, of course, research center, to breed them at a hatchery in Carlsbad. Now, the hatchery has had some benefit for the science of fish farming. In fact, the population of white sea bass has recovered largely.
But not because of this.
But not because of the hatchery. A new state audit found that very few of the fish were surviving in the ocean that came from the hatchery. And that's actually a good thing because so many of the fish are deformed that if they survive, their genetic problems might spread to the general population.
Correct.
So not working out. We pointed that out. Rai Ravar did a story about some of the troubles at the place a couple of years ago.
And that is true.
They were not pleased with that. Hit us pretty hard back.
Just said it was wrong.
And the audit seems to confirm a lot of the things that Rai found.
So a couple days ago, we talked to Ken Malbrough. He's a former city firefighter.
Mm-hmm.
He's running for the County Board of Supervisors. We talked to him about his race, his decision to get into politics, some of his history in the neighborhood. And
he's a good man.
Good guy. Good guy. I think you'll enjoy it. Take a listen.
We are joined in the Great Voice San Diego podcast studio by Ken Malbrough. He's an old friend of Voice San Diego and a candidate running for county supervisor. Welcome, Ken.
Thank you, and it's good to be here, and I really appreciate it. And I haven't seen you in a while, so
yeah.
I'm happy to be in the same room with both of you, with all three of you, actually.
Yeah, well, it's an honor for us as well. And I got to tell you, this is a very important local political podcast. You'll probably be besieged with all kinds of feedback and letters, and you probably won't be able to handle it. So I'm sorry about that. It's just so popular. But thanks for coming in. So if I remember right, let's go through some of your bio. You were a city firefighter, correct?
Yes, for 31 years.
31 years.
Yeah, I retired in 2012. The last 10 years, I was a deputy fire chief. Mm-hmm. So I've got experience from the ground level all the way to the top.
Yeah, so where are you from originally?
I was born and raised right here in San Diego. I grew up in Southeast San Diego, mm-hmm. and I loved it so much that I continued to live there, and I've raised 2 children, been married for 40 years.
How old are your kids?
My oldest, my son, is 38, and my daughter's 34, and I have an important 15-year-old granddaughter.
Wow.
Yes.
It must be something to see your kids be actual adult humans walking around the world.
It is amazing because like every other parent, you wonder, are they going to make it?
Right.
But, it's a good thing they're both working. But you know what? They don't own homes.
Right.
And I'm bothered by that. In fact, my youngest, we moved her back in with us because I couldn't stand to see her struggle like
mm-hmm.
that. And so those are some of the reasons why I'm involved in this, because I want to make changes.
One of the other things, you've been involved in community planning and
yes.
Other community groups. Tell us which ones now and what you've done since you retired.
Well, there's 3 major groups that I've been involved in. One is the Consolidated Plan Advisory Board, or CPAB. That's the City of San Diego board that's been around for quite some time. I'm the co-chair. I've been there for 5 years, and what we do is we handle HUD funding, mostly CDBG, Community Development Block Grant monies. But they do many other things. But they get about $10 to $12 million a year. And we do, what I do specifically is the RFPs by the nonprofits that want some of those dollars. I'm still the chairperson for the Encanto Neighborhoods Community Planning Group. I've done that for 7 years. And I'm proud to say that in 2015, 2016, we got an updated community plan, which hadn't been done in 30 years.
Wow.
And that was not an easy process. And lastly, I've been the chairperson for the O'Farrell Valencia Park Town Council for about 12 years. So public service as a professional, public service as a community member. And that's why I'm here. That's why I'm running.
Okay, so you're running for county supervisor. We've talked to Lori Saldana, Nathan Fletcher, Omar Passons. Bonnie DeManis hasn't come in yet. We're still holding out hope. What made you really want to run in this race for county supervisor? So it's District 4 goes all the way from the coast into your district, mostly the city of San Diego, and it's currently represented by Ron Roberts.
Right. Well, it's a long story, but I'll try to keep it short. I was raised by some great folks. They're all gone now, but one of the things that they did was to once do the best you can and don't forget to give back. I remember we kind of took care of my mom the last 7 years of her life. And, when you're starting to see the end, I would tell her how much I appreciate you and all that. And one day she just says, well, yeah, your dad and I did a great job, but don't forget about the people in your neighborhood, your Little League coach, your Pop Warner coach. Those people also did that. And I was shocked. But then I realized what she was trying to say. Don't forget to give back, son, because this is what helped you. And so, as I said, I have 31 years of public service and all these years in community service. The public service was fun. You get to get things done because you're the boss in that particular section. But when you're working in a community level, you're begging, pleading to make changes. And I'm in a community that needs changes, and there are many communities within that district that need the same. And one of the issues is that I don't think there's enough people at the table to help make those changes, and I want to be there. I'm not looking for a new job. I don't want to be in Sacramento or Washington, D.C. I just want to serve within this community. And I think with my skills as a professional and then my desire as a community person, that gives me those opportunities to do a great job, and that's why I'm running.
So when you decided to seek elected office to get in to pursue public service, my history with you mostly, we talked often when you were the chair of the Encanto planning group that was going through a community planning process, working pretty closely with the city.
Yes.
So when you decided to seek elected office, what was it that made you decide to pursue the county board of supervisors as opposed to city council, which is, you've done other things in your life, but certainly the thing that you had been doing at the time was more closely related to city government than county government.
Right.
So tell me a little bit about that decision.
Well, first of all, I get asked that question probably 3 or 4 times a week.
Why county board instead of city council?
Yes.
It might be because no one knows what the county board of supervisors does.
Well, you just kind of answered the question. With all the community work that I do, and I'm not trying to be rude to the present people who are there, but as I walk around and I canvass, people ask me, what does the county do? Where are they? And so, one of the things that I saw, and I have 4 issues that are important to me. One is access to health and human services, and of course, reducing the a homeless population and affordable housing, and believe it or not, disaster preparedness due to my 31 years experience. And when I looked at this, I actually felt, after doing some studying, that the county has the capacity to actually do more and help that as far as financing and the jobs that they do. The good thing about this is that I know the city very well, and I believe I have great relationships with the city leaders. I can actually call them, and maybe they'll get back to me in a short matter of time. But I actually think that because of my relationships and what I'm doing as a county supervisor, I can actually help get a lot of things going, a lot of things happening. And you got to remember, District 4 is 100% over the city of San Diego. And in order for us to get things done, we have to have a great relationship with, as well as internally with the county, but also with all the city leaders in order to get some things done, especially when we talk about the 4 areas. And so I actually thought, and it's a challenge. There's no kidding about that. I'm a first-time candidate, and it's a big hill to climb. But I have those skills to do that. I'm not afraid of that $5 billion budget. A budget is a budget. I've managed the budget with the fire department. I've managed personnel. And so I can handle those things. But I just want to get things done, and I think the county has the ability, especially in the homeless population, and reducing that. We should be charging. We should be leading the flag in that area, and those are the things I want to do.
So when we look at the race, there's Bonnie DeManis running as a Republican, and then on the left side of the spectrum, you've got several candidates, several rivals. You've got Nathan Fletcher, Lori Saldana, and Omar Passons in particular, and all fall along some sort of spectrum of the idea that there's a lot of resources being maybe not prioritized or not spent in the priority that they think should be deployed. And so Omar, and a little bit different distinction than Nathan and such, where do you fall among them about where and how county resources should be deployed maybe differently than they are now?
Okay. So it's a great question as to where do I fall on this. And I believe that the county has the capacity to be ahead of the story. We tend to only work on the symptoms, and we don't look at, so let's look at if we do reduce the homeless population. And so we do get more housing stock, because I happen to believe in housing first as the way to do that. But no one's talking about what do we do to make sure, so we cut that number down. How do we keep that number from growing? What are the things that we need to do? So my priorities is access to, again, the health and human services. I want to put more money, more personnel, more business opportunities for nonprofits to help in handling the issues that get to that point. I don't think people grow up and say, you know what? I want to go to jail.
Mm-hmm.
You know what? I'm going to be crazy. I'm going to be a drug abuser. People don't grow up and want to do that. There's issues for that. And I think we need to get out in front of that, because after all, that is the pipeline. When you start to going to prison or going out in the streets, when you start talking about mental health, clinical, substance abuse, domestic, trauma-informed care. And that's exactly what the county does. And that's why that's my major priority in trying to get things changed.
I think in terms of resources, one issue that's been brought up quite loudly lately is that, and particularly from advocates, is that the county has more money to spend on these things than they've been deploying in the past.
Yes.
And the County Board of Supervisors itself has been pretty hostile to that idea and has said, essentially, we are being fiscally responsible and prudent, and the amount of money that you think is available to deploy in all these different things actually isn't there if you look on closer inspection. If, in your opinion, what is the truth of that matter? Is there more money available in the county's current financial position to spend on homelessness, youth services, mental health services, et cetera?
Oh, absolutely. And I'll tell you what, I have used an article that was done by the Voice of San Diego to verify that. I forget the author, and I apologize.
Lisa Halverstadt.
Lisa, and I should know that she's going to kill me for that. But I've actually used that, and I've compared their budget to take a look at that. Now, a lot of people say they have. I've heard just the other day $2.9 billion, and I'm kind of sticking with yours. It's just under $2 billion. However, it's not a full $2 billion that's available. When you take a look at how you run a government, and I understand that very well, is that there's money that has to be set aside. And I'm using your number, $700 million should be there. And then they have some money that's encumbered for other projects, and about another a little over $3 million. So what they do have just floating in space is just a little at about $900 million that's there. Here's the problem. You have a group of individuals who've been there for a long time, and many of them came in when the county was almost bankrupt. and they had to make some very tough decisions, and they did a great job in bringing it out of that. However, in the manner of doing that, they have turned, this is tax dollars. We can't forget that. And what they have done is they've made their own rules on how tax dollars should be spent, only on one-time expenses. You can't really do that for tax dollars, and I don't abide by that. Yes, you have to be prudent. Yes, you have to be very careful with that, but there is that money, and we should be using that money to serve the citizens who actually that money belongs to.
So you mentioned the Encanto Community Plan. Congrats. That's the plan that basically says here's what the zoning is for the area. This is what you can build, how many homes and that such. Well, the county of San Diego went through its own sort of giant plan for the whole county, and it's called the General Plan, and it decided the zoning for some of the areas that aren't incorporated into cities. So one of those areas is the Lilac Hills Ranch area. It's 1,700 homes were proposed for the area, and in a way that doesn't conform to the new zoning plan that the county had gone through. They couldn't get it through the County Board of Supervisors before. It didn't actually make it to a vote. They tried to take it to the ballot, and the voters threw it out. Now it's come back, and they've said they've made some adjustments to it, and they're hoping that the County Board of Supervisors approve those after those modifications and such. I'm not sure exactly what those are. I'm still trying to understand it. But what do you think about that sort of project and the other projects that don't conform to that community or that general plan, but, may add some housing instead?
Well, obviously, when we're talking about, and a person I've already stated that I support housing first, and we're going to have to make some major changes on how we're doing things, and we have to be more efficient and effective in permitting processes. And we actually need to make sure that all our community plans are up to date, whether it's the city or the county, in order to get these things done. But another portion of that is, wouldn't it be great for a developer or anyone that wants to make changes that if they go to El Cajon or they go to San Diego or they go to Santee, the process is the same? Wouldn't that be something? Now, getting to your true question that you asked me about Lilac, I don't know all the specifics of that, but because I'm a community planner and I believe in protecting that community plan, and I believe that that's the outreach that should be done on it, and I'm a little cautious when we look at doing projects by initiatives, because it tends to overstep those people who are directly related, those who live in the area. I'm a bit skeptical on it, but if it meets their community plan, I see no reason as to why we wouldn't do that. But if we're going outside of it, then it's not ministerially, and that's an issue. But how we're going to do it, more likely, well, I don't think this one's coming to a vote. I think this is just staying in the county. And I will tell you, I would hope that the community planning group that's in that area has a lot more say than just, of course, the supervisors have the last vote on it. But if I was a supervisor, I'd be very attentive to what they're saying, not only waiting for them to come to me, I'd go there and find out, because I understand how important that is. Now, we have a problem, affordable housing. And for me, I'd like to know what would be the deal on this. Will there be affordable housing, or is this just market rate housing? Everybody has skin in this game, and we all need to be cautious of that to make sure that we do have that. So I hope that, I don't know if I answered your question directly, but
I think what you're saying is you'd have an open mind for it.
Yes.
But you're skeptical of projects that don't fit in the plan.
Yeah, exactly. I'm a person of honor, and I believe I wouldn't put 7 years in a planning group to not. Now, I understand NIMBYism, and then there's a new, or YIMBY. I was very impressed by that. I sit right in between that, because I know we have to make changes, and they're not easy. But as a leader, you have to kind of spearhead those changes, and it's not about what just only you want or what I want. It's what we all can live with, and we're going to have to make those kind of
one of the housing considerations that's relevant for county decision making that it's prevalent in the city, but certainly to a lesser extent, is how much it contributes to wildfire risk, and how much it would need to be considered in light of where the building is and how wildfire prone that is.
Right.
Lilac Hills is hundreds of yards from the location of the Lilac fire from last year. The name is not a coincidence there. And a lot of these projects that the county is considering right now are in state mandated wildfire risk areas.
Mm-hmm.
From your experience as a firefighter, what's the appropriate way to handle building new homes in undeveloped or semi-undeveloped, rural or semi-rural areas, and how much that contributes to wildfire risk?
Well, number one, it becomes a very large impact on taxpayers. When we continue to move further and further out into those type of areas, it just means, and eventually I will tell you, there will be a fire. I don't care if it's tomorrow or 20 years from now, it will burn. And we tend to dump a lot of money in that. And I'll be honest with you, I think we now need to start looking at less building out in the rural areas and start looking more at infield development to do that. And I realize that there's a lot of people that don't want that, but I'm telling you, what I've seen, the amount of monies that are spent on protecting homes that shouldn't be in areas to begin with, is just remarkable, the billions of dollars a year that we're spending on that. So for me, I am not a big proponent of moving out into rural areas. I prefer to first look into areas that were, for the sake of it, I can't remember the name, but more infield where we can reduce that risk of fire. Because listen, man, when you get a wind blowing 40 mile per hour and you have that fuel out there, all we can do is get out of the way.
Yeah.
So one of the discussions about fire in the county for years, since 2003, has been discussion about whether the county itself should maintain a fire department. L.A. County has a fire department.
Yes.
What the decision ended up being here is that we would sort of do a hybrid. We would deputize different volunteer and different outskirts sort of departments, as they would each get like one, fire authority, I think it's called, person or something.
Right.
They would participate, they would coordinate, they'd communicate better, but they're not actually part of the county fire. There's no fire department.
Right.
Do you think there should be a county fire department?
I think it would be run much better if we did have a full county. First of all, we would have a single element that's accountable to the taxpayers. Well, let me just say this, though. The work that has been done has been a vast improvement.
Oh, man, it's incredible. 2003, it was a mess, and now it's super lined up.
It's working much better than it ever has. But, my job is to try to improve on that. And that would be very tough to some, but I think a county fire department would be a great idea, but it is expensive. It would be very expensive. And we need to figure out, first of all, ideas are great, but they're not great if you can't figure out how to afford them. You have to have a plan on that. And so that will be a long time coming, I believe. But I'm glad what we're doing right now has made a tremendous difference.
Your area of town was one of the few that wasn't as enthusiastic as others for the legalization of the commercial aspect of cannabis. And in fact, it's been that way. There's been the discussion. I remember Tony Young in that district was pretty hostile to the idea for a while. Now the county is grappling with it decided to ban cannabis commercial activity, even though it's allowed in other parts of the county and in the state.
Right.
And there's issues now closing down some of these shops that come up, Spring Valley, Lemon Grove, a bunch of other places. What's your take on that? Do you think the county should allow some of these businesses to operate, or do you think it's good going for now and let's maintain that ban?
Well, I'll tell you, as much as I respect the current supervisors, because it's very hard to lead. I think their decision on not doing anything, especially in the unincorporated areas, and which leads to illegal actions, and so which leads to more costs for us. I also believe in democracy. The people have spoken, and this is what they want. And it's my job to make sure that we enforce that, we provide that service, but we do it in a safe way. We make sure that those who want it are safe. We make sure those who don't want it are safe as well. We make sure there's constant rules. There are challenges because the federal government does not look at it. And so what we have is a cash-based business, and I'm concerned about that. But the other part of that is that that's going to create jobs and opportunities, and we should never overlook that. And it's time to make that change. And in my community, it's been very tough. Trust me, sitting on a planning group, and they're starting to come our way, and we fill the room up when those do come. And you're absolutely right. There's a lot of folks there. But you know what? I think 4 to 5 years from now, that will change. And I think that we need to settle that. But we have to do it by good leadership. And sitting on your hands and doing nothing is not good leadership. We have to take care of that. And I'm really surprised that the current leadership in county has decided to stray away from it.
I want to ask a little bit about the actual politics of the race real quick. This race is in one thing that's interesting about it is multiple candidates have kind of left and gone back and forth between their parties for a period. I've never known you in our conversations to be a particularly partisan guy. Are you a longtime member of the Democratic Party? What's your registration history?
I've been voting since I was 18 years old.
Always a Democrat?
And for a short time, I drank the lemonade of Ross Perot for about 2-3 years. That didn't work. I found some
Those
things.
charts were good. You were like,
the charts were great, but I've learned since then you really need to do your homework, and there were some things that I realized that was not a good idea. So I went back to being a Democrat, and I'll tell you that has a lot to do with my parents. My parents dragged us into every time they voted because they wanted to make sure that we understood how important that was. And I did that to my kids, and they all vote. It's almost like we have a party during elections. We all show up, we vote, and then we go out to eat. So, however, but when you're saying nonpartisan, listen, I serve a community that is very underserved. And I will tell you that I am not going to stay in a party line when someone from outside of a party has a good idea that I think will be beneficial. And I'll always be that way. I am a Democrat. There's no doubt about that. But that doesn't mean that I will not listen to a Republican or independent or whatever, because I'm all about making change. And if you have a good idea, I could care less what party you're in. Let's just sit down and talk and see how we can make it work.
Sorry.
I hope I answered your question.
Yeah. Well, so like, had you been closely involved with the county Democratic Party apparatus and any of their community-oriented groups, or walking for other candidates, that sort of thing?
Well, after the November elections, I realized just voting doesn't make a change. And so I did get involved. My involvement level is that I'm actually a delegate for the 79th Assembly. And that's the first time I ever ran for something.
Were you motivated by the Trump election?
Absolutely. Absolutely. And I believe that we fell asleep on I don't know how better, we just were passive about some things.
It's amazing how many people we're talking to that went through a similar process and said, I got to do something.
I went through anger, fright, shame, and I realized that didn't change anything. And so I decided, you know what, Ken, you got to step up.
So you mentioned your parents a couple of times. If you grew up in southeastern San Diego, your parents must have been part of the generation that was kind of restricted to living there or nowhere else, that we had a genuine redlining situation in San Diego. And are the effects of that still lingering in the community?
Yeah, I think financially people are stuck in certain areas where they can afford to live. And unfortunately, that causes many other issues. And I'll just give you one pure example. The Encano Neighborhood Community Planning Group consists of about 8 different neighborhoods, and the average income is about $47,000 a year. What does that mean? Well, everybody needs to eat, everybody needs business services, and everybody likes name brand businesses, right? But they're not coming because the AMI per rooftop is too low. And so that's a effect for them. So what happens is we're almost a business desert, in my opinion, in that community. And we can no longer rely on outside corporations wanting to come in. And so we have to start looking at entrepreneurship, community involvement, engagement in order to build our communities up. But financially, people are stuck in that community because it's where they can afford. And the sad thing is that we leak a lot of money outside of our community. We invest in other businesses that are not located there, and they're doing quite well.
Do you see the reverse? Do you see wealthier people moving in because of the housing and affordability?
In my community, not yet, because I don't see enough market rate housing coming into our community. But there's a little bit of change. In other words, you're talking about gentrification, I guess. Yeah. I see it more in other areas like Barrio Logan, but I haven't seen that in Encano. But, you know, I think we will see some of that eventually. But the thing is, you know, I went into planning because, you know, you talked about how I grew up and we were segregated, but we had all the services that we needed. And we invested in those services. But something went awry and those services went away.
When did that happen?
Yeah, when?
You know, I actually believe when we start looking at and when integration changed, because, you know, remember I was born in 1955, so as a young child, I saw those changes. And I remember on Saturdays, we would go on Imperial Avenue and my mom would do all the shopping that she needed. And I'd get dropped off for a haircut and she'd do that. And then my dad would come to the barbershop and I got kicked out because they didn't want us there. So they can do men talk, and then I would go with my mom. But then I remember seeing flyers at the door, and it was right around like in the Civil Rights Act and all these things. And I don't think San Diego was as bad as the South, and I'm not saying that. But I remember seeing things like, you remember Unimart, White Front? I don't know if you grew here, but those were large one-stop shop stores like Walmart is today. But they were in other locations, and I think people started looking at money as money. And if you're willing to drive and get it, you can come out. And unintentionally, I think a lot of our community members drove out and started investing their monies in businesses, name brand businesses in other areas, which really left the businesses locally, they left them hanging.
Yeah, and there was a study the city did like 10 years ago about the amount of retail spending that's leaked out of the community from people who live there and drive and do their grocery shopping and whatever other spending else outside the district.
Absolutely. And, you know, my goal when we did the planning group, or when we did the plan update, I initially wanted to say I had to do 6 things. Today, I have to park and drive 6 times in order to do that. What I wanted to do is at least cut that in half, where I can park once and do 3 things and drive and park and do another 3 things within my community. That was my whole idea on that and bringing that, but it's a little more difficult than I thought. The old saying is, if you build it, they will come. It's not really happening.
What did you went to school in the district?
Yes, Emerson Elementary, Memorial Junior High. I lived in Lincoln. My parents, they didn't want me to go to Lincoln because they thought I'd get in trouble, so I went to San Diego High. Got in the same amount of trouble at San Diego High.
Well, Ken, one of the things that as we look at we had an interesting conversation or interaction with the Bonnie DeManis campaign this week, and she's getting a lot of fire because she's. It was revealed that she was working with her lawyers to get to make sure that she had the legal right to protect and to get a pension while she got a county salary if she won this seat. And she pointed back and said she's not the only one, and that we turned out that was you. She was pointing out you would get a pension from the city and maybe collect the salary. What would your take? Would you refuse it like she did, or is she completely off the rails on this thing?
Well, she made her own decision, and here's what I'll say about that. She's got 2 retirements, I believe, as a judge and then as a DA. She earned those retirements, and she's worked hard for that. I'm not going to knock that. I may not agree with everything she's done, but I know she's worked hard in her job, and so she's earned that. And I'm a man of integrity. I am not going to knock somebody because I've been retired since 2012, and I also earned my retirement. I've worked hard for that. And so I'm not sure how the rules are with the county as far as I'm getting a city retirement. But I hadn't even thought about that until I started seeing these articles. I really didn't.
Mm-hmm.
Listen, I'm not rich. We live off of that income.
Mm-hmm.
We live comfortably off that. And I don't plan on having my family has given up enough for me just to go into this campaign.
Mm-hmm.
And so I am not going to put them in a position where they are going to have to suffer because of that. So I plan on working on continuing my retirement.
Mm-hmm.
I can't sit here and say, no, she shouldn't do that.
And take the salary if you win.
Right. Exactly.
Well, Ken, when you look at the race, what would you want people to make sure they understood about you?
Well, I try to answer your questions honestly, and I'm not a salesman, and that's just because of the 31 years as a firefighter. You know what? You call us, we come, we do our job. We don't ask for anything, but are you okay with that? Did we do what you needed? And then we go away. And so when and that's not what a campaigner does. You have to sell yourself. And so I'm a first-time candidate, and I am what I am. I'm honest, and I'm original. I try to answer questions, and I try to tell you that this is what I want to do. And it's different. It's very different. And I'm not that well known. And so my campaign, what I'm doing, is grassroots. I'm knocking on doors. I'm not getting I do have a couple of endorsements, Dr. Shirley Weber, Tony Young, and there's some local folks who really believe in what I'm doing. But I don't have those big-time endorsements. And, that bothered me at first. But you know what? I have a saying on my campaign that I'm unbought and unbossed. And I kind of like that.
Well, I didn't know you had Shirley Weber. That's fantastic. She's one of my favorites.
She's great.
That woman can speak.
She not only can she speak, she can get things done.
Yeah.
That's even more important. But I'm a grassroots person, and I believe in serving people. Again, like I mentioned to you, I don't have desires to go outside of this city to as a politician. I want to make changes here. And I tell people that if you want somebody that's going to actively represent you and make you feel like you're at the table, then I'm that person to do that. And that's what I'm going to work hard for. And again, I'm knocking at doors, man. I'm walking every day. I'm going to every event that I can to get to know. And I understand it's tough because, there's things. And I appreciate you all, because when you mention this race, you do mention my name. There's other papers that won't mention my name on there. So I don't know if I answered your question, but I'm just straightforward, and that's what I'm doing.
Ken Malbrough, he's running for county supervisor. He's been involved in San Diego community planning for a long time. Thanks for coming in.
I appreciate that. I enjoyed it.
Good.
And now back to our sponsored interview with the Prevent Drowning Foundation of San Diego. So Nicole, tell us your story from, how did you learn to swim and how you got your job where you are today?
So at age 3, I started swimming at Memorial Pool. My mom started me in swimming lessons there. So from ages 3 to 10, I was consistently enrolled in various swimming levels where my love for swimming and water grew immensely, as well as my appreciation for the lifeguards, the instructors, and the coaches that taught me. I loved swimming so much as a child. I was that kid who, under their uniform clothes, had their swimsuit on at all times because I was so ready after school to just get into my swimming classes and start swimming. I loved my instructors so much that at the age of 6, when my mom and dad were in the hospital thinking of a name for my baby sister, I suggested the coolest name I knew at the time, Elizabeth, who was my swim instructor at the time. And actually that name stuck. So that is my baby sister's middle name. And then at 16 or at about 10 years old, I started swimming on the Memorial swim team and competed against other local rec league swim teams until I turned about 16. At 16, the pool manager recommended that I take the aquatic career education class where you learn to become a certified lifeguard, and I did that. After passing the class, I immediately got hired to work at the City Heights Swim Center. While working at the City Heights Swim Center, I took the water safety instructors course in order to become a swim instructor and to teach all levels of swimming to all ages. I loved every minute of teaching. It's such a fun and rewarding experience to see someone learn a life-saving skill and having fun at the same time. So this motivated me in becoming the swim team coach at the City Heights Swim Center, where I coached approximately 40 kids as young as 6 years old.
Wow.
Yeah. So after coaching various years and being the head lifeguard, as well as being an emergency medical responder, applying to become a pool manager was recommended to me by my supervisor. So I did that. And although I didn't want to leave my established team, I knew I would have the amazing opportunity to help more people in the community. So I applied and ended up getting the position, which was awesome. And so I was relocated to the Bud Kearns Pool in Morley Field, where I worked as the assistant pool manager alongside a super great staff. And as an assistant manager, I took on a lot of responsibilities, including working positions that were above mine in order to gain experience, as well as joining committees within the aquatic department. And after a few years of being an assistant manager, I then applied for the pool manager position. And on my second try, I got it.
Way to try again.
Yeah. Keep trying. It was then announced I was going to be the new pool manager at the Memorial Pool, and I could not have been happier. Just having the opportunity to give back to my home community, it's such a great feeling, and I'm so honored to do so. Learning to swim has provided me so many opportunities from moving up swim levels when I was in swim classes to being able to now provide these programs to the community and to be able to educate and teach the public on water safety. And I have all that to thank to the instructors who inspired me as a child, the coaches who motivated me as a teen, the guards who impressed me as a worker, and the supervisors who advised me and helped me as a manager.
Wow, what a cool job. Congratulations.
Thank you.
So summer is right around the corner. I have 2 kids, 5 and almost 3, and neither of them are quite what I would call water safe. So what advice do you have for parents like me who have kids that are not water safe?
I would say get them in swim lessons as soon as possible. There's no excuse. It's a vital life-saving skill and an amazing activity. Even parents too, come join our adult class, and we'd love to help you out, whether it's on a stroke technique or getting over the fear of water. We want everyone to be educated on the importance and the safety aspects of knowing how to swim, and it's also really fun.
Awesome. Well, thank you. I have it on my list of things to do to sign up for swim classes. So
we will motivate you, Casey. Trust you.
George, tell us your story and how programs provided by Waterproofing San Diego, which Buck talked about, how that program impacted you.
Well, my story also starts when I was young, back in 5th, 6th grade. We had friends that had pools, and we were always getting invited to have pool parties and go out and hang out in the water. And at that age, every kid just sees water and just want to jump right in.
Mm-hmm.
But the one that motivated me to take swim lessons wasn't actually myself. It was my mom. My mom was the motivation that I needed to get swim lessons because she unfortunately never took swim lessons and she didn't know how to swim. So one of her biggest fears was us going to the beach or to a friend's pool that was unattended and us drowning.
Right.
So that was the biggest motivation that I got. So at the age of 9, 10 years old, I took swim lessons all throughout the summer. Once I got to like 6th, 7th, 8th grade, I stopped taking lessons. But fortunately for me, those swim lessons actually stuck because of those instructors that were teaching it. They teach those lessons so well to the point where it doesn't seem so much as you're learning. It's more you're just having fun in the water. At the same time, you're learning how to swim. And that's what propelled me to do high school swim all throughout my 4 years at Hoover High. And from there, after I graduated, I decided to get a job. And I figured I already know how to swim.
Mm-hmm.
I love the water. So why not just pick up a job as a lifeguard? So one of my coaches told me about the city employee jobs, and they told me, hey, you should become a city guard. You could work here, you could work at any of the pool, and get paid to do what you love. So I did, and
here you are, and you've got your City of San Diego pool manager shirt on right now.
yeah, and I'm proud to be a part of the community, helping out. One of the things that really that I'm proud of is the fact that I not only do I work for the City of San Diego, I work at my home pool.
Yeah.
Yeah, so that's really great for me. And as Nicole said, she used to coach swim team, and I followed in her steps. Funny fact is that when I was swimming there at City Heights, she was the coach there.
Oh, no way.
Nice.
Yeah.
Small swim world here in San Diego.
So I pretty much followed in her steps. I became the swim coach. I did the assistant manager, and I'm still doing it now. And I'm looking for my promotion as well.
So you were a lifeguard for a while.
Yeah.
Aside from the obvious of being paid to be around water, which you love, what are some of the benefits of being a lifeguard that we maybe overlook?
Well, one of the greatest benefits is you meet people like Nicole and other people that love doing their job, helping out the community. And even though there's days where it's like the community is always like wanting more, or sometimes you get that one customer that's kind of like, oh my goodness, this is so much. Why do I do this? But then you have those days, every other day, I should say, where you're teaching lessons, you're talking to parents that really are thankful for the services that you do, and that's what helps you push you forward to do better, to make sure that you're giving the best of what you got. So not only do you achieve your goals, but the kids in the community, they could achieve their goals, and they have someone to look up to.
So Buck, how can people find out more about Waterproofing San Diego? And, even if they don't have kids who need to go through the program, can they help by volunteering or getting involved some way?
Right. Well, the first thing is that they've listened to this and that they've become aware, and they're listening to stories from Nicole and George, and hopefully they're as motivated as they'll ever be. But I mean, it's a challenge. Nicole and George epitomize the whole Waterproofing San Diego concept. They started young, and it's not easy, but they stuck with it. They're obviously super talented. And right now, all that stuff that we need to do to teach kids to swim costs money. So the foundation that we have, the Prevent Drowning Foundation, is a funding arm to try to raise money to continue to fund these courses. Now, there's certainly a ton of support within the City of San Diego and Park and Rec, but the bottom line is there's some Learn to Swim classes coming up right now that sell out. And we need more money to bring more classes so we can teach more kids to swim so they can turn out to be Nicole and George. So basically, if you go through our website, Prevent Drowning Foundation of San Diego, you can either start to volunteer or donate if you wish. And more importantly, share these stories with your parents, your teachers, your friends. And we want to get as many people in San Diego to learn how to swim as soon as possible, because remember, we're teaching everybody in San Diego how to swim.
Well, I have, with that confidence, I have no doubt you'll do it. For more information about the Prevent Drowning Foundation of San Diego, visit www.preventdrowningfoundation.org. Thanks for listening to Voices San Diego podcasts. This show is part of the Voices San Diego podcast network. Visit voiceofsandiego.org/podcasts. There, you'll learn more about our award-winning arts and education podcast, CultureCast and Good Schools for All, the Cura Chaos podcast about movers and shakers on both sides of the border, Beer Talk Radio, our business show, I Made It in San Diego, our sports show, The Kept Faith, and the rest of the shows in the network. Voices San Diego is a nonprofit. The majority of our budget comes from grants and donations from readers and listeners like you. If you like the show, please take a minute to go to voicessandiego.org and click the donate button. Or if you have a business and would like to sponsor the show, contact development@voicessandiego.org or call 619-550-5664.